Yes, folks, what you're looking at, that's me. I have a split personality. So I decided to put this on the screen. I'm going to explain the problems I have with credit cards and all, but I'm also going to give you some idea what you can do if you have problems. You can't pay your bills. I'm going to try to help you. What I'm going to do is, right after I get done with this discussion, I'm going to give you chapter 9 from a book my wife wrote about me. It's called Railroad to Prison. I'm just going to give you chapter 9. Then it's going to go into a couple TV shows about it, and that'll be the end of it. But in the meantime, I'm going to give you an idea what you could do. If you're getting a lot of calls, they're harassing phone calls. If it's more than one call and they keep calling and different numbers and all, and you can't pay. So what to do is make sure you keep a phone log. You put the date, the time they called. I put the day down too because it's nice to have it. And the phone number they're using and what bank it was and any comment. Keep track of that. The best way is to do it, if there's more than one bank, try to do it, a sheet for each bank so you don't get all mixed up, everything running together. That's what happened to me. A few months ago, I was getting all these calls I couldn't pay because my wife went into a nursing home. And our combined money went towards it, and I couldn't pay the bill. So that's what happened. They start calling me and I didn't know what to do. I got this lawyer. He's in San Diego, California. It doesn't matter. I'm on the East Coast. It didn't matter at all. I contacted him. I told him. And he told me he can help. He's an advocate. I gave him all the information and all. And he sent me back an agreement. And I signed it and sent it back to him by email. And that was it. So then he started working on all the cases that I had, more than one. So what happened on one of them, one I had, just give you one example. One, it was like I had $3,000 on 3 cards. I had 3 cards with this bank. And they kept calling, and I wrote it all down. And he contacted them, and he got them to take off the $3,000, mark it paid, stop calling me, and he got paid also, plus I got money. So that's why it's important that you do it. Do something. Now, he may not be able to help with every account, but he can give you advice, and there's no charge. You don't have to pay for this. I know because I've done it. The banks have to pay him, his fee. So I don't know why these banks do this, but because they're getting away with it, and most people don't know about what I'm telling you. Because this lawyer has access to the legal system and we don't. For us to do it, we probably wouldn't do it right, and they wouldn't pay attention to us either, like they would him. You're getting these calls, and they're only, according to the law, these collectors or creditors, they're not supposed to call you before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m. So if that happens, you definitely have a case, because that's a violation. There's other violations that we don't know, but the lawyer does. So keep it in mind. Now, if you just want to, say one account is calling you, you can't pay, you can send them a letter. And you just put your name and information on there and the date, and just put, to whom it may concern, cease and desist all communication with me, and sign it. Mail it to their office, make sure you have the right address, and send a certified mail return receipt. As soon as they get that, they're supposed to stop the calls right away. It doesn't mean you don't owe it. You still owe the money, but they can't call you. So if you want to go that way, you can. So now there's another thing I want to discuss here. So now if you don't, you can't pay, I would make sure you don't make any deals with these companies, because statute of limitations varies from state to state. So I'm in Pennsylvania, it's 4 years. That means if I owe, it doesn't matter the amount so much. Say I owe $1,000. And for my last payment, I could have the card for 4 years, but it doesn't count when you open the account. It counts from the last payment you made. That's why it's very important, once you stop paying, don't start up again, because now it's going to start the clock running again, whatever the last payment the last payment that it is. So just like, okay, say you didn't pay an account, and 6 months later you get a call, start getting calls. and they give you all kind of deals. Okay, we can take off $500 and you only have to pay $10 a month and all. And if you do that, now you're gonna owe that debt collector that money, and it's going to start the clock running. So that means now the statute of limitations starts all over again. It's important not to make any deals once you stop paying, unless you get some money and you want to pay it off. Okay, I'm giving you this advice because people don't know all about this stuff, and that's why these credit card companies are getting away with it. The best thing you can do is call this lawyer. I'm going to give you this information. So when I start this up again, you're going to see this is going to be chapter 9 right here of Railroad to Prison that my wife wrote about, about what happened to me. She's going to explain some of it there. Then you're going to get a Stolen Identity TV show about me. Then you're going to get another TV show about true name fraud. Because right after that show, that's when they broke in our house. With guns drawn and the doors knocked in and everything. About this situation I was in. So now, okay, I think I better start it up now. I think I discussed enough of this. I also am going to discuss it in the description. So now I'm going to try to start this up. Chapter 9, Final Thoughts. In this chapter, I am going to review the story and mention things that I feel would further prove that the government did railroad Frank to prison. First of all, even though Frank got all that credit, our lifestyle didn't change. We both worked and were happy together. We only bought things that we needed. I asked Frank why he didn't tell me that he was drowning in credit card debt. He said he didn't want to worry me, and he thought that he would maybe get a large loan and pay off some of the debt. I think that Frank was playing Russian roulette with those credit cards. It took the government over 8 years to indict Frank. During this time, nothing changed. If Frank would have gotten rid of all the files he kept, the government wouldn't have had enough evidence to frame Frank. I think I proved that Frank didn't devise a scheme to defraud anybody. Before the United States Postal Service knocked in the doors on our home, the government was determined to get a conviction on Frank, to take the heat off their department because of the primetime TV show on True Name Fraud, which aired the night before the break-in. This show caught this guy they called Ponzi in the act by following him around our city with their hidden cameras. The United States Postal Service couldn't catch Ponzi, but the TV show did. The United States Postal Service targeted Frank for True Name Fraud because of the prime-time live TV show on Ponzi. After the United States Postal Service went over the evidence that they had seized from our home, they realized that Frank did not commit true name fraud and changed the charge to credit card fraud. According to the affidavit of the search warrant, no items in our names were supposed to be seized. However, the United States Postal Service seized these items anyway. The United States Postal Service violated our Fourth Amendment rights by intimidating me by putting a loaded gun to my head while I was sleeping, and by handcuffing Frank with his hands behind him instead of in front of him. It wasn't the false information that Frank put on the credit card applications that got him into trouble. It was the true information. This one bank noticed that all the accounts had the same phone number, street address, and Frank had his name as an authorized user. This bank contacted the United States Postal Service to investigate. I feel that if Frank would have destroyed all the files that he kept, the government wouldn't have enough evidence to convict him. One more thing here, before I move on to something else. When the judge sentenced Frank to pay full restitution, She told him that he used other people's money to supplement his income. The problem here is that this restitution order listed about 1/3 of the accounts in our names, and the rest were in other people's names. You may be wondering, how can I recall the details that I mentioned in this story? When this ordeal started over 20 years ago, Frank told me that he was going to write down everything as it happened, and he told me to do the same and keep this information in a box in case we would need to prove something later on. This box was loaded with all the writs, appeals, motions, and lawsuits, and anything pertinent to Frank's case. So now you know how accurate this story really is. I mentioned Mr. Johnson here because he was Frank's Huckleberry friend, and Frank even called him Huckleberry. This Mr. Johnson undermined Frank. I called him the electronic criminal. Remember, what this guy did 20 years ago was groundbreaking, because at that time, I am writing the story, what this guy did, now it would be a cybercrime. This Mr. Johnson was more of a bank robber than Frank was. The law reads, whoever takes and carries away with intent to steal or purloin any property or money, or any other thing of value exceeding $1,000 belonging to or in the care, custody, control, management, or possession of any bank, credit union, or any savings and loan association shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. The following was the video store's interpretation of this law as it applies to Mr. Johnson's embezzlement scheme. Mr. Johnson took and carried away with the intent to steal money exceeding $1,000 belonging to the bank of the credit card holder, whose number and expiration date that Mr. Johnson used to electronically transfer funds to his Mac Visa account, and he should be fined or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. The video store applied this law to Mr. Johnson's crime, the same way the government did to Frank in his crime. The video store is going to demonstrate why Mr. Johnson was more of a bank robber than Frank. Mr. Johnson walked into his bank and he withdrew $10,000 cash, which he had electronically deposited there. Mr. Johnson walked out carrying over $1,000. He broke the bank robbery law. Not only did Mr. Johnson do this once, he on several occasions withdrew other amounts over $1,000. Remember, when a bank robber goes into a bank to rob it, this person may show a demand note to a teller and not even be armed, but the authorities still class this bank robbery as a crime of violence. How many bank robbers get $10,000 cash and get away with it scot-free like Mr. Johnson did? The video store has never been robbed at gunpoint in its 10 years of operation. Mr. Johnson robbed the video store without using a weapon or violence, even though the video store may not be an expert in criminal law, but the video store was an expert when it comes to the investigation that they did on Mr. Johnson's embezzlement scheme of 1997. What I have stated here is a sample of a book that I am working on called The Electronic Criminal, which will be released to the public soon. All the stories I have written are connected. They can be read individually or as a trilogy. I chose to write Railroad to Prison now because it shows over 20 years of a relationship before Frank got into trouble and 20 years after the government used violence and false information to get a conviction on Frank. I think this story would be a great study aid for law students to see how the judicial system can be used to twist the law any way it can to get the result they want. I don't think even if Frank would have had Perry Mason for his lawyer that he would have gotten off scot-free. Believe it or not, Frank is glad that the government is taking 15% of his Social Security towards the restitution that he owes. This is better than trying to pay all those credit cards that he had. This government offset didn't kick in until Frank retired. So, if I would have had written this story sooner, it wouldn't have showed how the government works, even using the law to take money from your Social Security. I have a confession to make here. When Frank was sentenced, I was in the courtroom with his best friend. We both wore disguises, and Frank didn't even know we were there. I almost got up and yelled out when the judge said that I was just as bad as Frank, because we shared the stuff that Frank got with other people's money. And she said that I could get someone else to take Frank's place. I kept my cool. We left before Frank, and when Frank came home, he told me what the judge said, and I said that I know, and Frank asked me, "How do you know?" I told him I was there with his best friend. Frank said, "I didn't see you there." We both wore disguises. Frank then asked me, "Whose identities did you steal?" "Marie, you better be careful. They might do a news story on you like Action News did on me." I told Frank, "Your case should have been thrown out, the way that judge slandered me." Remember, this was before Frank started serving his sentence at the prison camp. No matter what happens from now on, I am so glad that Frank picked me as the girl of his dreams over 40 years ago. And I wouldn't have wanted to live my life with anyone on planet Earth but Frank. He is the guy of my dreams. I really hated to see Frank go through what he did because of getting involved with the government. I asked him about this, and he said, "Remember, Marie, in every life a little rain must fall." The following is the final thought of this chapter. Now that you heard our side of the story, you can judge for yourself. Was Frank railroaded to prison or not?
It's your most valuable asset and the easiest to steal.
People don't seem to protect their information, I don't think.
This convicted thief stole thousands from his unsuspecting victims.
People really can't be too careful. Our privacy is totally invaded, and with computers, our privacy is being more invaded every day.
But you can learn how to protect yourself and your credit.
That's the biggest thing. With that, you can steal somebody's identity.
Action News investigates Who's Got Your ID? Tonight on Action News.
If you're like most people, you would assume that your name and your personal history are yours alone. But an Action News investigation has found that crooks are ready to steal both right out from under you. Action News reporter Michelle McCormack has an inside look at how such a scheme works.
What happened was, I think it was like an evil twin.
And that's how Frank Leeper describes an 8-year spending spree, charging over $200,000 on over 80 credit cards. Accounts he opened using other people's names. People like Julia Feynman.
That was really frightening to me, that my own biographical information had been altered.
Information Feynman and other victims left at this Philadelphia video store where Frank Leeper worked and was still working at the time of his sentencing in federal court. The key was obtaining a copy of Feynman's driver's license and her Social Security number.
People don't seem to protect their information, I don't think. It's not that made it easy for me. It wasn't that. I mean, I did have the authority to where I worked at to that information at the time. So I used that to for my own sake at the time. But the intent wasn't really there for me to do any wrong to anybody.
In many cases, Leeper's name was on the account, along with the unsuspecting victims like Feynman. He would eventually get his own account in his own name. But damage to credit ratings had already been done.
It could come back to haunt me 15 years from now when someone looks at my credit report.
And for this paper trail of destruction, Leeper will serve 14 months in prison. If he had robbed a bank of $200,000, it would have been at least 5 years.
One is a crime of violence, which is going to be punished more severely. But when you have
this many credit cards run up, the violation is almost the same. It takes people years to get their lives back together.
But not all identity thieves operate the same way, Frank Leeper. Many steal pre-approved credit reports found in the garbage or discarded hospital and bank forms. And in the Delaware case of Roger Cullen and his wife, the Who's Who of America book found in your local library.
Should try to find somebody that was like 5 years younger or maybe 3, 4 years older.
The Cullens didn't share an account with the person. They actually became that person. They would get social security numbers from motor vehicle departments and copies of birth certificates, then obtain driver's licenses in other states with their own photos. Although most of their fraud was through department store credit cards and bank accounts, as Roger explained in this police interrogation, he even used an alias for a drunk driving arrest.
We just snapped. We just went nuts. We went crazy. What can I tell you? We knew we were doing wrong, but we snapped.
The paper trail of the Cullens crisscrossed the country, and by using so many aliases, they were virtually impossible to catch. It was a license plate number that led the Delaware State Police to the Cullens. Almost a decade and tens of thousands of dollars later, their luck had run out. Michelle McCormack, Channel 6 Action News.
Well, the Cullens may have been caught, but the work is just beginning for their victims who have to try to repair their credit. Now, tomorrow night at 11, Michelle's special report continues with advice how to keep from becoming a victim of stolen identity.
Your identity, they belong to you, right? Well, an Action News special report has uncovered thieves who could be stealing your good name and using it for their profit. In part 2 of our special report, Michelle McCormack has tips on how you can keep your identity yours.
I had given thought to it, and I thought it happened to other people, but it didn't happen to me.
But because attorney Julia Feinman had good credit and solid income, it made her an ideal target for identity theft. The information lifted from a video rental application by Frank Leeper, who worked at the store. Julia never knew what was happening until years later, when she just happened to check her credit report.
The victims can't rely upon the system to protect them. They have to take the necessary steps themselves to try to protect themselves.
Protection that begins in your pocketbook, as these Delaware State Police detectives showed me after spending just seconds looking through my wallet.
You've given everything away with those 2 documents, your driver's license and social security number.
In fact, whenever you can, you should leave your social security card at home and hidden. And before you throw out your mail, rip it up. That way you've destroyed any social security numbers or other account numbers that could easily be lifted by a criminal who goes dumpster diving. New Jersey-based Sensor sees a future without letters or numbers. It's developed iris identification and claims it's virtually foolproof.
0 false accepts. False reject rate is a little, you can live with that because, if you turn somebody down, it's not pleasant, but if you turn somebody incorrectly down, that's not so bad. And our false reject rate is very low. It's less than 3%.
And a British company named BTG has developed a system to verify your signature. The system is so secure that the people who guard it have the veins in their hands checked to protect access to the database. But everyday use, some fear, is a ways off.
The merchants out there aren't equipped to be able to read this type of information.
So in the meantime, it's up to you, and regardless of how guarded you are with your personal information, a credit report each year is the best way to make sure.
People really, really, really can't be too careful.
And if you don't want to take her word for it, just ask the man who stole her name and charged thousands of dollars for years.
I never intended to harm anyone during this whole thing. I would like to really help as many people as I could, but I think the best thing is just checking your own credit. That's the best thing you can do.
Michelle McCormack, Channel 6 Action News.
Your identity. It's your most valuable asset and the easiest to steal.
People don't seem to protect their information, I don't think.
This convicted thief stole thousands from his unsuspecting victims.
People really, really, really can't be too careful. Our privacy is totally invaded, and with the computers, our privacy is being more invaded every day.
But you can learn how to protect yourself and your credit.
That's the biggest thing. With that, you can steal somebody's identity.
Action News investigates Who's Got Your ID? Tonight on Action News.
Diane Sawyer in New York, Sam Donaldson in Washington, and Chief Correspondent Chris Wallace.
Tonight, a primetime hidden camera investigation.
Karen, believe it or not, that woman up there, you see, is you.
While all of these people were out at work, con artists were out on a shopping spree, charging expensive goods to their names with phony IDs, privileged information, and instant credit.
We're all vulnerable. If you have a social security number, you're vulnerable.
Our hidden cameras take you inside as you've never been before.
He's coming towards you.
Okay, we got him.
You'll learn how the con artists pick their victims, pick out their merchandise, and leave you holding the bills.
Could you tell us why you're involved in the credit card scam, sir? From ABC News, Prime Time will continue after this brief message. Prime Time, now from TV1 in New York, Diane Sawyer.
Good evening. Tonight we're going to take you someplace and show you something never captured on camera before. We all have a sense that the things we do by credit make us vulnerable. And even as I sit here with you tonight, an imposter could be out using my name. And by the way, using your name too. In fact, using your whole identity. Chief Correspondent Chris Wallace decided to see if he could get inside one of these fraud operations to see just how it works. Chris?
Diane, we've done a number of hidden camera investigations, but what you're about to see is special. For most of the summer, we followed a small gang in Philadelphia as they made big purchases using other people's names. At times we were so close, you might think they knew we were on their trail. The fact is, they never had a clue. This woman has just bought more than $1,000 worth of electronic goods. She applied for instant credit in the name of Karen Brosseau. Moments later, she was wheeling out a 32-inch television and a video recorder. But while the items were being loaded into a truck, Karen Brosseau was actually at work almost an hour away, selling tickets for the railroad.
I didn't think it was going to happen to me, and I didn't know how it happened. And that's what I'd like to know.
Primetime's hidden cameras also found this man buying 2 laptop computers using the name, social security number, and home address of Thomas Mahoney. We tracked down the real Tom Mahoney, who never bought those computers, but did get a bill for $4,700.
I don't know when it's going to end. I come home every night and open the mail, and it's just a guess as to who's going to inform me that I bought additional merchandise.
Tom and Karen are victims of a credit scam that is sweeping the nation. It's called true name fraud.
We're all vulnerable. There's nobody that's not vulnerable at this point in time. The crooks are that good. The scam artists, the suspects, they're that good.
Norm Willox, head of the National Fraud Investigation Center, has been looking into credit crime for more than a decade. We hired his firm as consultants for this story.
Credit card fraud is a $10 billion industry right now, and true name fraud is growing at a 40% rate within that industry.
In an effort to boost sales, more and more stores now offer instant credit. Come in with some basic information, and after a brief credit check, they'll let you charge thousands of dollars in purchases. The problem is criminals are beating the system, stealing a few facts such as someone's social security number, date of birth, or home address, and passing the credit check. Then they walk out with big-ticket items, charged to you. In California, this woman was convicted of using the identities of at least 15 people to make purchases of more than $50,000. In New York, authorities broke up a credit card ring. They say used the identities of thousands of people to steal more than $500,000 in just 10 months. Across the country, experts say that thousands of gangs are engaged in true name fraud, stealing the identities and credit of millions of Americans. One of the hottest spots is Philadelphia. So we came here to try to get inside a gang to see how it operates. And it was here that we came across a man named Keith Ponzo. Ponzo, his alias is Smoke, is 41 and has a criminal record that goes back more than a decade, including convictions on drug charges, theft, and credit scams. Members of his gang say he calls himself the King. We decided to start trailing him.
He's coming towards you.
Okay, we got him.
Very smart. He's street savvy, very controlling.
Detective Scott Kelly of Montgomery Township Police outside Philadelphia has been investigating Ponzo since June, when authorities got a call from this jewelry store in a shopping mall.
He seemed to be going and picking one watch, several rings, and was already ready to use the credit.
He was shopping.
He was shopping.
At another store, surveillance cameras caught this woman, who police say worked for Ponzo, buying televisions and camcorders after getting instant credit. Police arrested the woman, Ponzo, and 2 others they say were part of his gang. All told, that one night at the mall, police seized 3 diamond rings, a gold watch, and a gold bracelet worth more than $5,000, and another $1,600 in video equipment, all bought with instant credit, allegedly using someone else's personal information. As we looked into Ponzo, we found a former member of his gang, whose identity we agreed to protect and whom we will call Lee. This is not Lee's real voice.
Keith Ponzo is the boss of the whole operation. He runs everything. He's always saying, "I love America." Like, who's the man? I'm the man. That's the kind of attitude he has, because he's been beating him for so long and never got caught.
Even when Ponzo did get caught by Montgomery Township Police, he posted $5,000 bail and was out within hours. Experts say the justice system is so overloaded with violent offenders that credit crooks generally do little jail time.
He's walking down towards the car now.
In mid-July, with Ponzo out on bail, we got a tip that he and his gang were still in business. So we took our hidden cameras to investigate.
He's moving. You're right on 54th. Right on 54th, headed down towards Market.
One morning, he picked up a man known as Nails, who was arrested with Ponzo at that suburban shopping mall. They drove off with a woman known as Sherry. Our former insider, Lee, told us how Ponzo runs his operation.
When he say, "Let's go out on the route," it means let's go and see what kind of credit we can get and see if the name is popping. And then popping means that the name is good. They've got a lot of credit, and they make enough money to establish different types of credit.
And as we tailed them through Philadelphia, it appears that's what they were after, getting names and data to use for instant credit.
How do they get your personal information? They can get it out of the trash. They can get it by illegally pulling your credit report. They can get it by stealing your wallet. They can get it by stealing your mail. They can get it from a car dealership, doctor's offices, lawyers' offices, banks are very prevalent.
Sure enough, as we followed, Ponzo went straight to a local car dealership. While Nails stayed outside, Ponzo and Sherry went in and met with one of the salesmen there, Luke Babb. After almost an hour at the dealership with Babb, they left with some papers in hand.
Ponzo's leaving, Ponzo.
Next, Ponzo drove to a U-Haul truck rental, which police say was a telltale sign of what he had in mind.
When you bring a U-Haul of that size, they're there to fill it up.
Then Ponzo gave Nails some cash, and the team split up.
Just going up to Samson now.
Nails and Sherry knew what to do next. We trailed them to this rundown building that turned out to be a photo shop. Authorities say a critical part of this credit scam is getting an ID card with the crook's picture and someone else's name and vital information.
They've just assumed someone else's identity here at this photo center.
Detective Kelly noticed that at the shop, you could have pictures taken against different colored backdrops.
They could give you 2 different formats of identification cards to make sure that the salespeople believe who you are.
There was one more stop for Sherry to change into nicer clothes. Authorities explain that credit criminals often dress up, so salespeople won't question the big purchases they make. Nails and Sherry were now ready to go shopping.
They're moving again.
Okay, we got him.
We followed their U-Haul on a highway out of Philadelphia to a mall in the suburbs. Police say there was one more thing to do. They must make sure they know all the information to apply for instant credit.
They will sometimes record that information on the inside of a wrist, on the back of a cigarette pack, in case they do forget that information while filling out a credit application.
So wait a minute. They're sitting, filling out their credit application. They forget who they are, what their date of birth is. They pull out a pack of cigarettes and look in the back.
And there it is. That can refresh their memory so they get the correct date of birth.
We tracked Sherry and Nails into Best Products. Sherry checked out the jewelry counter while waiting for instant credit to be approved in the name of Karen Brousseau. Within minutes, the store said she could charge $1,100. She spent all but $18 on a big TV, a VCR, and some toys. Lee says Ponzo pays his gang a straight commission.
If you get 2,000 instant credit, he'll give you 200 to 250. If you get 5,000, that's 500. So it's basically like every 1,000 he'll give you $100 for it.
He's coming towards you.
We're ready.
At the end of the day, Nails and Sherry drove their truck back into the city to meet Ponzo and pass off the goods. Lee says Ponzo sells to customers who have ordered the merchandise or fences it, but his gang is left out of that part of it.
he never takes no one with him to sell the merchandise.
It was just one day on the job for Ponzo. And as we discovered, he had a lot more shopping to do. As we followed Ponzo and his gang around Philadelphia, we wondered, how did they get the names and credit backgrounds of their victims? What we found will surprise and no doubt will also worry you. Also when we come back. Ponzo's victims see for the first time the imposters who are using their names. There you are, your name, date of birth, social security number. Somebody's walking around as you. And we confront the man himself. Why is it that you're using other people's credit to buy thousands of dollars worth of merchandise? Can you tell us why you're doing that, sir? Learn how to protect your own identity when Primetime continues.
Return now to Chief Correspondent Chris Wallace and his inside look at the people who steal your credit and your name. In this segment, you're going to meet the victims who have no idea how they got drawn into this costly masquerade. They only know that they have been taken.
$10,191 so far. At last count, it was around $18,000, between $18,000 and $20,000.
Over $22,000.
We brought together just a few of the people who police say Ponzo targeted for his true name fraud. There's a doctor, a city worker, a businessman, and a student. The only thing they have in common is their credit was compromised. Most had no idea how crooks got their personal information, but Paul Kroom did.
I was at the gym and they broke into the locker and got my wallet.
Then they were off to the races.
Oh, yeah, well, within an hour they rented a car.
And then thousands of dollars in video equipment, clothes, and jewelry in the next 2 weeks. We told these victims how Ponzo's gang assumed their identities. Remember the photo shop which Nails and Sherry visited before going shopping? We showed Mary Woland, a student at the University of Pennsylvania, an ID card seized by police, created in her name. There you are, your name, date of birth, social security number. Somebody's walking around as you.
Unbelievable. I would never in a million years guess that anyone could reproduce an ID with all my information and their picture so easily and make it look so believable and be able to use it anywhere.
How vulnerable does that make you feel?
Extremely.
She might have felt even more vulnerable if she'd known how big Ponzo's operation was. During the 3 weeks we tracked him, we saw several different crews out shopping. Gang members told us 4 to 12 people work for Ponzo on a given day, each hitting 6 to 7 stores. Using other people's credit, the Ponzo gang bought all kinds of merchandise, from furniture to construction supplies to jewelry, shopping in malls in 4 different states. One time when we caught up with them, they were shopping here at this Radio Shack in South Philadelphia, looking for electronics equipment. Within minutes, the gang member known as Nails bought merchandise worth several $1,000s using the name Louis Bacardi. It turns out Bacardi is the head of the worldwide news organization Associated Press, based in New York. His credit was so good, authorities say, Ponzo's gang set up a mail drop at this Philadelphia row house in Bacardi's name. New charge accounts were opened and bills sent here, while Bacardi had no idea his credit was being used. We showed these victims what Ponzo's gang did with their credit. Remember the name Karen Brousseau, used by Sherry? Now, Karen, believe it or not, that woman up here, you see, is you.
That woman is me.
See that? 32-inch television set. Bought using your name, your credit.
This is very shocking.
You see, they got a shopping cart, and that's Karen Brousseau, supposedly. And there's a big 32-inch TV, and they got a U-Haul.
Never owned a 32-inch television in my life. I'm surprised and hurt. They've used my information for their own personal gain, and it's not fair.
But there's more to Karen's case. You may remember we followed Ponzo and Sherry to a car dealership where they met with salesman Luke Babb. Sources told us Babb sold Ponzo credit information on Karen and 2 other people for $50. This document confirms someone at the dealership did a credit check on Karen, who was never a customer there. Primetime has learned the call was made while Ponzo was meeting with Babb. We decided to ask the salesman about it. Mr. Babb? Hey, Chris Wallace from ABC News. How are you, sir? We wanted to talk to you. Do you know a fellow named Keith Ponzo?
You ever given credit information to anybody?
I never gave credit information to nobody.
Why not?
Because it's unprofessional, number one, and it's against the law, number two.
So we showed Bab the report from the credit bureau, documenting the check on Karen Broussard.
Oh, it wasn't me. There's other people work here besides me. I didn't give them anything.
But you were the person who met that day with Ponzo and Sherry.
Not me, sir. Sure wasn't me.
What if I told you we had videotape of your meeting with him? I'd like to show it to you if I could, sir. If you look in here, that's you. And then you came out of the dealership with them. And we'll show that to you, too. Could you explain to us why there you are, right on tape with the two of them, sir? Can you tell us why you did it, sir?
Ponzo was a lot harder to track down. Once we found him, he led us on a long, winding chase through his neighborhood. But he finally got tired of running.
Miss Ponzo, Chris Wallace from ABC News. How are you, sir?
Huh?
I want to ask you, why is it that you're using other people's credit to buy thousands of dollars worth of merchandise?
Oh.
Can you tell us why you're doing that, sir?
I don't know what you're talking about. Get them cameras out my face.
Well, why?
Get those cameras out my face.
Why are you using other people's names to buy?
I'm not using nobody's nothing. I don't know where you get your information from.
We've seen you, sir. We've seen your people buying TVs, VCRs,
I
stereos.
don't care who you see or what you see. Get those cameras out my face.
Ponzo then led us on another chase, this time by foot, before finally taking a kid's bike and making his getaway. As for these people whose credit was used, they are liable, at most, for only the first $50 of any purchase made in their names. The store or credit company is responsible for the rest.
Oh boy, I really liked you.
But don't tell them they're not victims. They must first prove they didn't buy the merchandise, and that's not easy.
What is that you've got over there?
Well, these are bills from companies and just things that I've had to deal with in the last 2 months because of Mr. Ponzo and his gang.
How much of a hassle has this been?
It's even got to the point where I don't remember exactly who I wrote the last letter.
These people have literally spent hundreds of hours cleaning up their credit.
We're sorry. All operators are still busy.
And it's more than an inconvenience. It can freeze your finances.
Please stay on the line.
Getting a mortgage for a home or a loan for a car may be impossible until your credit is cleared. Mary Woland, who worries about getting a student loan, has to deal with her bad credit every day.
Come to the store with me the next time I try to buy something. You have to stand there and verify that you're you.
Every time you go to a store to buy
Every time I go and use my credit card or my bank card, because both of them are flagged, yeah. Every time.
All of which raises the question, why do stores give instant credit with so few controls? We found more than a dozen cases where applications with bad information were still approved. On this one, the job description is 11 years old. The home and business phone numbers are wrong. But a member of Ponzo's gang was still allowed to walk out with almost $5,000 in jewelry. The reason, experts say, is that instant credit is so profitable.
When you're making quick decisions like that, you can't do everything you would normally do in a normal credit granting process.
But generally speaking, they're willing to put up with the fraud because the money they make off instant credit is so great?
Yes, because it's a cost of doing business.
We contacted a number of the stores and credit companies that were scammed by Ponzo. While none would talk on camera, they acknowledged true name fraud is a problem, but said most customers want instant credit to make large purchases fast. When we asked our group of victims what they want, they said they'd like to see a crackdown on credit crooks.
What would you like to see happen to Ponzo?
At least 10 to 15 years in jail, not with air conditioning. I'm talking about a real jail.
When I see these people just actually going in and doing this stuff, I mean, I think 10 to 15 years is very mild.
As for stores and credit services, victims of the scam said there's something wrong with allowing people to buy thousands of dollars of merchandise based on a brief computer check.
Maybe they shouldn't offer instant credit. You know, wait a week. You don't need that TV or that VCR or things like that.
Most of all, these victims of true name fraud want to warn all the rest of us, watch out. It can happen to anyone.
We're all vulnerable. If you have a social security number, you're vulnerable.
Chris, as widespread as it is now, it's hard to imagine it's not going to get even worse. So what do you and I do tomorrow?
Diane, the key to protecting yourself is to keep your personal information private. Memorize your social security number and don't carry it with you. Once crooks get it, they can find out almost everything else about you. Limit the number of credit cards you carry. Report a stolen wallet or ID to police right away. This helps later to verify that you didn't make those purchases. And alert credit bureaus. Your name will be flagged so they can call you before any new credit is approved. As for car salesman Luke Babb, we told his bosses what we found. They did their own investigation, and he was fired. And then there's Ponzo, who according to our sources is still in business. But he's due in court on Monday to answer charges stemming from his arrest last June. We'll be right back.